They say silence is peaceful, but for millions of people over 70, silence is not peace, and it's a warning sign. Did you know that seniors who live alone are up to 60% more likely to develop depression, anxiety, and even experience premature cognitive decline? And most of them don't even realize it's happening. Now ask yourself, could it be happening to someone you love, or even to you without noticing? The truth is, living alone after a certain age may seem like independence on the surface, but beneath it, many are silently suffering, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But here's the good news. This doesn't have to be your story. In this video, you're going to discover what no one talks about when it comes to aging alone, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Backed by emotional truth and real human stories, we'll explore how to break the silence, reconnect with purpose, and live with dignity, even in solitude. And stay with us, because at one point in this video, you'll hear a deeply moving confession from someone who turned loneliness into strength. It's something you've probably never heard before, and it might just change the way you see aging forever. So take a deep breath, clear your mind, and listen closely. What you're about to hear may not only open your eyes, it might also warm your heart, give you answers, and help you understand that even in the quietest rooms, you are never truly alone. It's strange how silence can sometimes scream the loudest, especially when you're alone, not in a crowded room where no one talks to you, not in the quiet moments before sleep, but in the long, unbroken hours of solitude that stretch through each day after a certain age. Many who live alone past the age of 70 understand this truth deeply, and yet few speak about it. Fewer still listen, because society doesn't like to talk about this part of life, the part where independence subtly transforms into isolation, where freedom once celebrated slowly becomes a quiet, invisible prison. At first glance, living alone at 70 may look like the ultimate symbol of self-sufficiency. You manage your schedule. You eat what you want, sleep when you please, answer to no one. But behind this veneer of autonomy often hides a growing emptiness that no one prepared you for. Waking up to silence, eating in front of a still plate, going days without hearing your name said aloud. These are not just passing inconveniences. They become a slow erosion of the senses, of the spirit, of the feeling that you still matter in a world that moves on without you. This kind of loneliness is not always the result of a choice. Life in its constant motion pulls people apart. Children grow up and build lives elsewhere. Friends get sick, move away, or quietly fade into their own solitude. One day you look around and realize the house that once echoed with laughter and footsteps has become eerily still. Even the objects around you, familiar chairs, cherished photos, mugs collected over decades, feel like they've gone silent too, as if mourning the absence of life. And here's the haunting truth. This loneliness doesn't show up on any medical scan. It won't raise alarms at a routine checkup, but it eats away at you. It gnaws at the edges of your emotional stability. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It slips in through routine. The empty chair in the living room, the leftover coffee in the pot, the television humming in the background, not for entertainment, but as a stand-in for companionship. What makes it more painful is the way the world sees it, or rather fails to. There is a cruel myth that aging strips us of our emotional depth, that past a certain age, feelings become dull, desires irrelevant. But the truth is, the heart of an elderly person still beats with the same hunger for connection, the same yearning for closeness. It still breaks. It still hopes. It still remembers what warmth feels like. Some try to hide the pain. They smile when the children call, post cheerful messages in family group chats, send chain texts that say good morning with animated flowers. But behind those digital gestures often lies a profound silence, a quiet prayer, a waiting that never fully ends, a heart trying to fill an absence that modern life seems to have no space to acknowledge. And it's not just about the presence of other people. Loneliness is not merely the lack of company, it's the absence of connection. You can live in a building surrounded by neighbors and still feel stranded. You can exist in a bustling city and still feel like no one sees you. That's the most brutal form of solitude. Not being alone, but being unseen, being unheard, being emotionally disconnected while physically surrounded. Over time, this silence begins to leave marks. It changes how you speak. It dulls the sparkle in your eyes. It alters your posture, your energy, your rhythm. People who live in isolation for years often talk less, smile less, expect less. They begin to retreat, not just from society, but from themselves. And that retreat can become a cycle. The longer the silence lasts, the harder it is to let anyone in. Even when someone offers help, affection, or companionship, there's a resistance, a fear of being dependent, a fear of being vulnerable, or perhaps a deeper fear that they've forgotten how to share life with someone else. But here's the truth, perhaps the most important truth of all. No one is meant to age like this. No human being is wired for complete isolation. We are stories waiting to be shared. We are memories that long to be kept alive in someone else's heart. We are conversation, touch, laughter, presence. Without those things, something essential within us starts to fade. And that is why this video starts here, with what no one tells you. Because yes, living alone after 70 can offer peace, tranquility, and autonomy, but it can also carry an emotional weight that is heavy, silent, and invisible to most. If you're going through this, let these words sink in. You are not alone, even if it feels like you are. Even if the world has gone quiet around you, there are millions living a similar experience, and there are ways, real, meaningful ways, to transform that emptiness into something whole. But first, pause, breathe, look around, acknowledge your journey, recognize your resilience, and know that simply by being here, by watching, listening, reflecting, you are already breaking the silence. You are already reconnecting. You are already stepping out of the invisible. You are not forgotten. Your presence matters. Your life is not over. It is still unfolding, and there is so much more waiting to be lived. At 70 years old, the body begins to speak in whispers of pain and slowness. The knees ache when you stand. The sleep you once took for granted becomes fragmented, unpredictable. Medication becomes routine. Doctor's appointments start to outnumber social gatherings. But what no one talks about, what often goes unnoticed even by those living it, is that the mind also ages, and sometimes it quietly breaks. Mental health after 70 is a delicate landscape. It's not just about memory loss or confusion. It's about the weight of unspoken grief, the quiet panic that surfaces at night, the fog of purpose that creeps in when the days feel too similar and the future too vague. Society often brushes these experiences aside, as if emotions in old age were less valid, as if growing older somehow makes you immune to pain. But it's the opposite. Emotions become deeper and more fragile. Anxiety and depression don't always scream in the elderly. They whisper. They manifest not in tears, but in fatigue, not in drama, but in silence. A lack of appetite, a loss of interest, a restlessness that won't go away. The problem is, when these signs appear, they're dismissed. It's just old age, people say. She's always been like that. He's just lonely. But these are not personality quirks. They're warning signs, and far too many people miss them. Imagine waking up every day with pain in your joints, with the silence of an empty house pressing on your chest, with the fading voices of people you miss echoing in your memory, and still being expected to smile, to carry on, to not burden anyone. That is the invisible battle that many elderly people fight every single day. Depression in old age is not weakness. It is not ingratitude. It is not making a fuss. It is a human response to loss, change, and disconnection. And often, it is suffered in complete silence, because the person going through it doesn't even know they're allowed to name what they feel, because they've been taught to endure, to not complain, to keep going. Anxiety also wears a different face in this stage of life. It shows up as worry that spirals out of control. It disguises itself in insomnia or hypervigilance or obsessive concern about loved ones. Did I lock the door? Will my children be okay? Will anyone find me if something happens? These thoughts are not irrational. They're the mind trying to make sense of a life that has lost its structure, its feedback, its daily warmth. And when there's no one to talk to, no one to truly listen, these emotions pile up, layer after layer, until the weight is too heavy, not for the body necessarily, but for the soul. Yet amidst all of this, something extraordinary happens, something almost miraculous. Every day, in silence, without applause, millions of elderly people still get up. They make coffee. They stretch, even if it hurts. They remember to take their medication. They water their plants. They fold their laundry. They do it all without being seen, without being praised. And in that, there is a kind of strength that is almost superhuman. These small acts, these ordinary, overlooked actions, are victories. They are medals that no one awards, but that should be recognized. Because behind every clean dish, every fresh shirt, every tidied shelf, there is a person who chose to live, who chose to move, who chose not to let the silence win. Washing the dishes with trembling hands, remembering which pill goes where, choosing what to wear, even when no one will see. Cooking a meal, not for anyone else, but for yourself, because you still matter. These are not trivial moments. They are declarations of dignity, and in the context of aging alone, they are revolutionary acts of resilience. What many don't realize is that maintaining a routine when you're living alone isn't just about survival, it's about sanity. It's about anchoring yourself in the present when the past feels too far gone and the future feels uncertain. And for that, motivation can't come from the outside. It has to rise from within. A quiet kind of motivation, fragile and flickering but powerful nonetheless. And still, despite all the internal effort it takes just to get through the day, many elders go one step further. They reach out. They care for others. They remember birthdays. They send blessings. They knit for charity. They check in on neighbors. Their hearts remain open, even as the world gets quieter around them. That is not weakness. That is grace. Of course, not every day is easy. There are mornings when the silence is unbearable, when the pain is too loud, when even brushing your teeth feels like climbing a mountain. And yet, when those days come, and you still find the strength to rise, to move, to breathe through it, that is a triumph no one sees but one that should be celebrated as the miracle it is. In these moments, there is something profound, something that speaks to the human capacity for endurance. Because even in isolation, even when no one is watching, the act of continuing becomes a sacred ritual, a testament to everything you've survived, and a reminder that you are still here. And when you take a moment to appreciate that truth, when you pause, just for a second, and whisper to yourself, "I made it through today," you are honoring your own journey. You are reclaiming a piece of your identity that the world may have forgotten, but you haven't. Living alone at 70 is not a weakness. It is a daily demonstration of willpower, of independence, of quiet courage. And every step you take, no matter how small, is proof that you still belong to this world, that your presence matters, that your life, in all its simplicity and struggle, is still unfolding with meaning. So if today all you did was make the bed, take your pills and breathe, then today was a victory, and tomorrow is another chance to keep going. Because aging does not mean fading, it means transforming. And in the quiet of your own rhythm, there is still beauty waiting to be lived. There's a particular kind of fear that begins to take root after a certain age. It's quiet, persistent, and often denied even to oneself. It whispers questions into the mind during the most vulnerable hours of the night. What if I fall in the shower and no one finds me? What if I have a stroke while I'm asleep? What if something happens and there's no one there to notice? These are not irrational thoughts. They are not paranoia. They are the sobering human fears that haunt the lives of millions of elderly individuals who live alone. The body, once a trusted companion, starts to falter. The knees buckle. The heart races without warning. Dizziness becomes more frequent. Something as simple as reaching for a cabinet or bending to tie a shoe becomes a calculated risk. And with each physical limitation, the mind begins to map out possible emergencies, asking, "Will I survive this?" Alone, this fear doesn't scream. It simmers. It hides behind daily routines. It accompanies you to the bathroom. It lingers in the kitchen while you cook. It lives in your pocket, tucked inside your phone, which you keep nearby just in case. And it's exhausting, not physically, emotionally. It drains you, because living in constant alert, in a state of readiness for something terrible that might happen, turns every day into a silent battleground. So many begin to avoid risks altogether. They stop cooking because the stove feels unsafe. They avoid showers at night in case something goes wrong. They limit outings, even when their legs still carry them. Not because they don't want to live, but because they are terrified of dying unseen, of being found too late, of their story ending without witness. This fear is not just about illness or accidents. It's about the deeper terror of fading out of life unnoticed, of becoming a forgotten presence in a world too busy to care. And that brings us to an even more delicate truth: the emotional distance that often grows between elderly parents and their adult children. No parent raises a child hoping they'll stay forever. The greatest act of love is to set them free, to help them build lives of their own. And most parents do that proudly. They help their children grow wings. They wave goodbye as they move to other cities, start families, chase dreams. But what no one warns them about is the silence that fills the house once the children are gone. The ache that doesn't shout, but quietly settles in the empty rooms. For many elderly people, the loneliness they feel is not from being entirely alone. It's from being gradually forgotten. The visits that were once weekly become monthly, then maybe a video call, if time permits. Birthdays are remembered, sure, but celebrations become more symbolic than sincere. Life moves quickly for those who are younger, but painfully slow for those who wait. And here lies the paradox. The love for the children never fades. The pride remains. The understanding, too. They have their own lives now, you tell yourself. And it's true. But that doesn't soften the sting when a phone call never comes. When holidays pass with no visitors. When you sit alone at the dinner table knowing full well that you're still alive in their memories, but not always in their day-to-day. There is a kind of heartbreak that comes with being a background character in the lives of people you once held at the center of your world. It's not about anger or resentment. It's about absence. About missing the small things. The sound of their keys in the door, the laughter echoing down the hall, the clumsy hugs of grandchildren running through the living room. All of that fades. Slowly, quietly, but deeply. And still, many elders protect their children from that sadness. They defend them. They're busy. They have their own families now. These are not just excuses. They're shields. Because admitting the hurt would feel like betrayal of the very love that still defines them. So they swallow the ache. They put on a brave face. And they wait. But what if we could change this story? First, by naming the truth. Yes, the fear of illness when living alone is real. Yes, the pain of being distant from your children is real. But acknowledging it doesn't mean surrendering to it. It means reclaiming power. Because there are things that can be done. There are steps that offer safety without stealing dignity. Wearing a medical alert device. Setting up check-in calls. Building trust with neighbors. Knowing the local emergency numbers. Keeping essentials within reach. These aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of wisdom, of preparation. They transform fear into readiness. And readiness breeds confidence. But more than that, there's something else even more powerful. Connection. Not just with family, but with anyone. A neighbor, a friend from church, the clerk at the corner store. These small human contacts can form a web of care. One that reminds you that even if your children are far away, you're not entirely alone. If you're a parent feeling forgotten, know this. Your worth is not tied to how often the phone rings. Your identity is not diminished by how much space you occupy in someone else's calendar. You are still whole, you are still valuable, and you deserve to be seen. And if you're someone watching this who has a parent, grandparent, or elderly neighbor living alone, reach out. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient. Today. A 5-minute call can breathe life into an entire day. A visit, even once a month, can anchor someone's sense of worth, because aging doesn't need to be about loss. It can be about reconnection, reflection, renewal, but only if we remember to see the people who once saw everything in us. So if you're watching this from a quiet home, with memories in your heart and silence in your halls, know this. Your story is still unfolding. The fear is real, but it doesn't define you. And distance, even emotional distance, can be bridged. Sometimes all it takes is a voice on the other end of the line saying, "I'm here. I haven't forgotten you." Sometimes the most powerful moments of connection come from the most unexpected places. A neighbor waving from their balcony, the barista who remembers your name, a shared smile with someone at the bus stop. These are not grand gestures. They are brief, quiet interactions that carry immense weight, especially when you live alone. After 70, friendships no longer revolve around loud celebrations or shared ambitions. They become about presence. A steady, sincere presence that asks nothing but offers everything. For those living in solitude, these small connections can be the difference between feeling invisible and feeling human. Imagine the impact of a simple question. Are you okay today? Not out of obligation, but from genuine concern. That one question, that flicker of care, can break through the thickest silence. These are not casual exchanges. They are soul-level reminders that you still exist in someone's world. And perhaps the most beautiful truth is this. Friendships after 70 don't need to be old. They just need to be real. A new neighbor, a friendly volunteer, someone you meet at church, Age does not limit the ability to bond. On the contrary, it sharpens it. Because by this stage of life, you've seen enough to know what truly matters and what doesn't. These bonds, however small, form a net of emotional safety. They might not replace the family that has drifted away, but they stitch together moments of joy, sharing a cup of coffee, talking about the weather, laughing over memories. These things may seem small to others, but to someone who eats alone, sits alone, wakes and sleeps in silence, they are sacred. And just as vital as connection with others is the connection with yourself. One of the most underrated gifts of aging alone is the freedom to rediscover who you are, without compromise, without interruption, without the pressure to perform. When the house is yours alone, the rhythm of life changes. You eat when you're hungry, not when the clock says it's time. You listen to music that moves your soul, not what someone else prefers. You dress for your mood, not for the expectations of others. In this quiet freedom, there's an unexpected gift. You begin to meet yourself again. The world often paints aging as a slow decline, a process of fading. But for those who embrace solitude with intention, it can become a renaissance, an awakening, a soft, steady unfolding of authenticity. No more need to cater, no more need to please. You are the master of your time. You choose how your day unfolds. And that autonomy, though it comes wrapped in solitude, can become a source of immense pride. Many who live alone at this stage say that for the first time in decades they are finally living life on their own terms. That in the quiet, they hear themselves clearly. That in the absence of constant company, they've become their own best friend. This isn't loneliness, it's sovereignty. But even with this freedom, even with small friendships offering connection, there is still one presence that many consider the most faithful of all, the divine. Faith after 70 becomes more than religion. It becomes relationship. It becomes dialogue. It becomes the invisible companion that walks with you through every empty room, every aching morning, every quiet night. For many, God is not a concept. He is a presence, a warmth, a knowing. He is the whispered prayer at dawn, the quiet comfort before bed, the reason they rise when no one is watching, the strength behind every silent victory. The rituals of spirituality are not just routines, they are anchors. Lighting a candle, holding a rosary, whispering thanks before a meal, reading a passage that brings peace. These small moments ground the soul, especially when everything else feels uncertain. Faith doesn't need to be loud to be real. In fact, it is often in the silence that it grows strongest. Because when there are no voices around you, no footsteps echoing through the house, no one to answer your call, it is your spirit that answers back. And for many who live alone, it is their faith that keeps them from falling into despair. It is the reminder that even in solitude, they are never truly alone, that someone hears, someone sees, someone cares. This kind of spiritual companionship cannot be touched or measured, but its presence is undeniable. It offers courage. It restores dignity. It replaces fear with peace, and it allows for one of the most powerful realizations a person can have at any age. I may be alone in this room, but I am never abandoned. In this final chapter of solitude, small friendships become light, freedom becomes strength, and faith becomes the hand that holds yours when no one else can. So if you're living alone, know this: your life is not small, your days are not meaningless, your presence is not fading. You are living something sacred, something that requires grace, courage, and immense soul. And whether your strength comes from others, from yourself, or from something higher, the light within you still shines. It is seen, it is felt, it is real.